Henry Maurice of Battenberg was a lesser-known royal whose life was marked by turbulence, ambition, and quiet heroism. Born in 1858 during a time of political upheaval in Europe, he carried noble blood but was deeply affected by his parents' morganatic marriage, a union deemed unequal by the aristocracy of the time. From the outset, Henry was sidelined by royal protocol, yet he rose above limitations through military service and a fateful marriage to Princess Beatrice, the youngest daughter of Queen Victoria. His life tells a compelling story of resilience, love, and self-determination in a world dominated by hierarchy, lineage, and rigid tradition. From the gilded halls of European palaces to the unforgiving battlefields of Africa, Henry carved his legacy as a prince who dared to step beyond the shadows of scandal and earn his place through merit. His journey reflects the tension between social status and personal courage, making him a fascinating figure in the complex tapestry of 19th century royalty. Henry Maurice of Battenberg came into the world on October 5, 1858 in Milan, then a possession of the Austrian Empire, during a time when Europe's map was being redrawn by the thunderclouds of imperial ambition. His birth was no grand affair heralded by church bells or royal salutes. Instead, it arrived under a shadow of dynastic scandal, a technicality that would define his early years. His father, Prince Alexander of Hesse and by Rhine, had committed an unforgivable sin in the eyes of Europe's aristocratic elite. He married Julia von Hauke, a Polish lady-in-waiting whose rank was so far below his that the union was deemed morganatic, a term that in the 19th century was as damning as a social media shadow ban. In the stratified world of monarchy, a morganatic marriage meant that neither the spouse nor their children could inherit titles, thrones, or the full prestige of the higher-ranking parent. It was a dynastic demotion, a public declaration that love had trumped protocol. The fallout was swift. Alexander and Julia were effectively ostracized from the highest echelons of royalty, forced to cobble together a new identity to navigate the snubs of their peers. They invented the family name von Battenberg, a title that was both a compromise and a consolation prize. It granted them a foothold in the aristocratic hierarchy, but made clear they were a step below true royalty. For the newborn Henry, this meant entering life with a peculiar style, Illustrious Highness Count Henry of Battenberg. The title was a paradox, simultaneously noble and limiting, like a verified badge on a social media account that secretly screams, "Not quite legit." It signaled his proximity to power while barring him from its inner circle, a reminder that he was welcome at the banquet, but not at the head table. Yet within 10 weeks of his birth, a sliver of redemption arrived. Grand Duke Louis III of Hesse, perhaps swayed by pity or political maneuvering, elevated Julia von Hauke to the rank of Princess von Battenberg. This upgrade automatically lifted infant Henry to the status of Serene Highness, a title that carried a touch more gravitas. In the coded language of monarchy, serene was a polite acknowledgement of nobility, but it came with an unspoken caveat: don't dream of thrones or crowns. At home, however, Henry was simply Lico, a nickname born from a nanny's affectionate mispronunciation of Enrico. It was a small human detail in a world obsessed with titles, a reminder that even princes are first shaped by the warmth of family quirks. Henry's childhood was a whirlwind of contrasts, a tapestry woven from the opulence of palaces and the discipline of military garrisons. The Battenbergs, despite their morganatic taint, were not outcasts in the truest sense. They moved in elite circles, their connections strong enough to secure invitations to the grandest courts of Europe. Henry and his siblings, Alexander, Louis, Marie, and Francis, grew up as high society darlings, their charm and good looks disarming even the most snobbish blue bloods. Their adolescent playgrounds were the glittering ballrooms of Darmstadt, the echoing riding halls of Vienna, and the manicured gardens of Baden-Baden. They befriended future kings, queens, and emperors, their social calendar a dizzying blur of state banquets, hunting parties, and diplomatic soirees. Yet beneath the silk waistcoats and sugar-glazed pastries, there was an undercurrent of exclusion. Certain dynastic charts, those meticulously curated lists of who could marry whom, politely ignored the Battenbergs, their morganatic origins, a stain that no amount of charisma could fully erase. For Henry, this meant navigating a world where he was simultaneously celebrated and sidelined, a guest star in a drama that reserved the lead roles for others. His education reflected this duality. He was tutored in languages, history, and etiquette, but also trained in the martial arts of a soldier. At a young age, he joined the Prussian Hussars, earning a lieutenant's commission that instilled discipline and a swagger that would later turn heads. The military life hammered muscle into his frame and sharpened his posture, transforming the pampered teenager into a man who could wield a saber as confidently as he could a dance card. This blend of courtly polish and soldierly grit made Henry a magnetic figure, a young man who could charm a dowager duchess one moment and spar with a cavalry officer the next. His time in the Hussars was formative, not just for the skills it imparted, but for the identity it forged. In a world that questioned his legitimacy, the Army offered a meritocracy of sorts, a space where courage and competence could outshine a questionable pedigree. It was here that Henry began to dream of a life beyond the drawing rooms, a life where he could prove himself not as a footnote to a scandal, but as a man of action. The turning point in Henry's life came in April 1884, at a wedding that would alter the trajectory of his story. His elder brother, Prince Louis of Battenberg, married Princess Victoria of Hesse, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, in a ceremony that drew Europe's royal elite to Darmstadt. Among the guests was Princess Beatrice, Queen Victoria's youngest daughter, often called Baby of the Empire. Beatrice was an unlikely romantic heroine. At 27, she had spent her life under her mother's formidable shadow, groomed to serve as Victoria's personal secretary and emotional anchor. The Queen, a widow since 1861, relied on Beatrice to fill the void left by Prince Albert's death, a role that came with an unspoken expectation. Beatrice would remain single, a perpetual companion to her mother's grief. Victoria, however, was a paradox. While fiercely protective of Beatrice, she was also a compulsive matchmaker, delighting in pairing her children with strategically chosen European cousins to cement alliances. The wedding of Louis and Victoria provided the perfect stage for such scheming, and it was here that Henry, a dashing 25-year-old with a soldier's jawline and almond-eyed charm, caught Beatrice's attention. Their meeting was electric, a spark that crackled across the polished floors of Windsor's micro-universe. Beatrice, reserved yet quietly rebellious, saw in Henry a kindred spirit, an outsider who, like her, chafed against the constraints of their roles. Henry, for his part, was smitten by Beatrice's intelligence and understated defiance, qualities that shone through her dutiful exterior. The gossip columns of the day, yes, even the Victorian era had its version of TMZ, buzzed with speculation. Could the Queen's baby defy expectations and pursue a love match? The idea seemed audacious, even reckless. Beatrice's sisters, particularly the sharp-tongued Princess Louise, whispered that marriage would cost Beatrice her independence, tethering her even more tightly to Victoria's orbit. Continental snobs, meanwhile, clucked that Henry's morganatic roots made him an unworthy suitor, a social climber grasping for a crown. But Henry and Beatrice were undeterred, their connection fueled by a shared hunger for a life less ordinary. The path to their engagement was a masterclass in Victorian drama, a backstage tug-of-war that would make reality TV producers weep with envy. Queen Victoria, ever the helicopter parent, laid down a non-negotiable condition. Any husband of Beatrice's must agree to live with the Queen, effectively signing up for a lifetime under her watchful eye. It was a deal-breaker for most suitors who fled at the thought of sharing a palace with the Empress of India. But Henry, equal parts romantic and pragmatist, saw an opportunity. Marrying Beatrice meant not just love, but a leap into the heart of the British monarchy, a chance to trade his second-tier status for a seat at the imperial table. On January 27, 1885, after months of delicate negotiations, Victoria gave her blessing. The speed of what followed was breathtaking, even by modern standards. Parliament, eager to smooth the path for the royal wedding, rushed through a special act to naturalize Henry as a British subject, a process so swift it would make today's tabloids scream about fast-tracked citizenship. The next day, he was knighted into the Order of the Garter, one of Britain's highest honors, and granted the coveted title of Royal Highness. In a matter of hours, Henry had vaulted from aristocratic obscurity to the front ranks of royalty, a transformation as dizzying as going viral overnight. His new status was a triumph, but it came with a catch. He was now a Prince of Britain, but his life would be dictated by the rhythms of Victoria's court. The wedding took place on July 23, 1885, at St. Mildred's Church in Whippingham, a picturesque chapel on the Isle of Wight, draped in ivy and bathed in sea breezes. It was a scene straight out of a period drama. Beatrice's silk train fluttered in the summer air, the church overflowed with society's A-list, and the scent of roses mingled with the salt tang of the Solent. On the surface, it was idyllic, a moment of unity for a monarchy obsessed with appearances. But beneath the pomp, tensions simmered. Beatrice's sisters, protective and skeptical, worried that she was sacrificing her autonomy for a man who, in their eyes, might be more opportunist than soulmate. European aristocrats, still sniffing at Henry's morganatic origins, muttered that the marriage was a step down for the house of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Henry, however, carried himself with the confidence of a man who had just won the lottery. His gold-braided uniform gleamed, his smile radiated triumph, and his vows rang with a sincerity that silenced the doubters, at least for the day. The ceremony was a public relations coup, a testament to Victoria's ability to spin even a controversial match into a narrative of love and loyalty. The Illustrated London News devoted pages to the event, its engravings capturing every detail from Beatrice's lace veil to the glittering array of foreign dignitaries. There was no honeymoon in the modern sense. Instead, Henry and Beatrice moved directly into Osborne House, Victoria's sprawling Isle of Wight retreat, where the Queen's presence was as inescapable as the tide. Their life was structured around Victoria's whims: breakfasts with the Empress of India, afternoons sketching in the gardens, evenings reading aloud from Walter Scott novels, or drafting bilingual correspondence. To modern sensibilities, the arrangement feels suffocating, a newlywed's nightmare of in-law intrusion. Yet Henry and Beatrice carved out moments of intimacy, stealing midnight strolls along the cliffs or sharing private jokes over tea. Rumors swirled that Victoria spied on them from her windows, a tale that may have been apocryphal but sold newspapers by the bundle. Their marriage produced 4 children in neat 2-year intervals, each a living thread in the tapestry of European royalty. Alexander, born in 1886, would later become the Marquis of Carisbrooke. Victoria Eugenie, born in 1887, was destined to wear Spain's crown as Queen Ina. Leopold arrived in 1889, followed by Maurice in 1891. The Battenberg children were more than just heirs. They were dynastic hyperlinks, connecting the courts of London, Madrid, Sofia, and beyond. Henry, once a pariah in the dynastic boardroom, now sat at its head, his bloodline a trending commodity in the royal marriage market. Despite the joys of fatherhood, Henry's life at court grew stifling. His official roles, governor of the Isle of Wight, colonel of volunteer battalions, were prestigious but painfully ceremonial. He spent his days in starched uniforms, cutting ribbons at civic events or enduring speeches about drainage systems. Contemporary caricatures captured his boredom, one sketching him yawning behind a dais as a mayor droned on. The soldier in him, forged in the Prussian hussars, yearned for action, real mud, real danger, real stakes. The drawing rooms of Osborne House, with their endless tea trays and polite chatter, felt like a gilded cage. In November 1895, opportunity knocked. The British Empire, ever hungry for control, was planning a new expedition to the Ashanti Empire on the Gold Coast, modern Ghana. The campaign aimed to crush resistance, install a puppet government in Kumasi, and secure rumored gold reserves. For Henry, it was a chance to escape the monotony and prove himself beyond the parade ground. He lobbied Victoria relentlessly, his charm and persistence wearing down her maternal instincts. The Queen, aware that African wars were brutal, resisted fiercely, urging him to stay safe in the comfort of her court. But Henry's arguments, why should younger officers claim all the glory? Why can't a prince earn his stripes? Finally won her over. She relented, extracting promises of caution in regular letters, as if malaria could be swayed by royal decrees. Henry departed London in khaki, his sword polished and his mustache waxed to a lethal curl. The press framed his adventure as heroic. "Prince Henry to the front," screamed the headlines, casting him as a gallant knight of empire. But among the rank-and-file soldiers, there was skepticism. Would this prince, accustomed to palace comforts, slow them down with aristocratic habits? The tropical heat of the Gold Coast answered with a vengeance, hitting like a physical blow. As military secretary to Colonel Francis Scott, Henry rode through dense jungle, where humidity clogged the lungs and mosquitoes swarmed like a biblical plague. His letters to Beatrice painted a romantic picture: sunsets over cocoa-colored rivers, Ashanti drums echoing like distant thunder. But between the lines, he admitted to nightly fevers and growing fatigue. The expedition marched 40 miles inland, hacking through vines, building supply roads, and negotiating with wary locals who remembered earlier British incursions. Henry's role was logistical, coordinating supplies and communications, but he threw himself into the work with a soldier's zeal. Yet in the small village of Prasu, just 30 miles from Kumasi, his story unraveled. A mosquito's bite delivered malaria, a disease that had felled countless soldiers and explorers. Shivers gripped him, his temperature soared, and quinine, the era's only defense, proved useless against the parasite's onslaught. His entourage rushed him back to the coast, loading him onto HMS Blonde in a desperate bid for recovery. The warship became a floating hospital, its cabins heavy with the scent of liniment and despair. On January 20th, 1896, as the horizon glowed with pre-dawn light, Henry's pulse faded. He was 37, an age when many today are still charting their paths. The news spread like wildfire, telegrams streaking to London with black-bordered urgency. Queen Victoria, who had once opposed the marriage, wept for the son-in-law she had come to love. the empire grappled with a strange emotional dissonance. Pride in the Ashanti victory clashed with grief for the prince who had paid the ultimate price. HMS Blenheim carried his coffin home, its ensigns at half-mast, its crew white-gloved and solemn. On February 5, 1896, St. Mildred's Church, where Henry and Beatrice had wed, hosted his funeral. Rain drummed on the roof, candles flickered, and violins wove a mournful elegy. Even political rivals, hardened by years of parliamentary sniping, were said to shed tears. Henry's tomb, in what became the Battenberg Chapel, was a Gothic sanctuary within the Norman church. Beatrice would join him there in 1945, followed by their son Alexander in 1961, creating a marble tableau of a family bound by love and loss. The chapel remains a quiet testament to their story, its Celtic crosses and stained glass a whisper of Victorian grandeur. And that's the remarkable and often complex story of Henry Marisa Battenberg, whose life continues to resonate through history. What are your thoughts about Henry Marisa Battenberg's journey and legacy? Do you feel history has been fair, or has Henry Marisa Battenberg been misunderstood by generations? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories from history. Thank you so much for watching.